Good evening. This is Sandy Shellis with Environmental Coffee House, and tonight we have Vanessa Blakeslee. She's with us. I have to say, we're going to build an audience. I am really, really honored. It's such a pleasure to have Vanessa with us. Vanessa has she writes short stories. She's an author. She's won awards. She has been amongst the best of company at Yaddo, which is a writer's retreat. I'll let her tell you a little bit about that. But she's been in good company. Hannah Arendt and James Baldwin, Leonard Bernstein, Truman Capote, among others, had also been endowed with scholarship from there. And her newest book is Perfect Conditions, correct?
Yes, I have a copy of it here.
So welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandy. It's a very much a pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, you know what? I thought we'd start because I'm fascinated by your background from writing as a youth and how it's stayed with you. And tell us a little bit about your humble beginnings and what brought you on the path and what's kind of brought you full circle to where we are now, which is how I see how you're evolving.
Okay. Yeah, I started writing from the time I was really young. I mean, 5 or 6 years old when you first start to learn how to write in school. I was writing my own little stories and typing them up on the typewriter and making my own illustrations, making my own little books. So I was doing that throughout my childhood, and I always wanted to be an author, so to speak. And then when I was in college, I discovered that there were such wonderful things as writing workshops, and you could not only major in English, but, concentrate in creative writing. I learned there was a master's degree you could get. It's the Master of Fine Arts, and actually I have two different masters. And that's okay. And so I just really had that narrow focus from the beginning, which not everyone has. Sometimes people develop their interests along the way. But I was one of those people who did have it early on. And so my first book, Train Shots, which was my first story collection, came out in 2014. And that was followed by Juventud, which is the Spanish word for youth. So that's if you're familiar with Spanish, you know that. That book, yes. High school, yeah. I don't speak Spanish very well anymore. I used to, but unfortunately not. But that book came out in 2015 and received, really great reception, wonderful reviews, and readers have really, really loved it. And then my latest book, which is just out this month, is Perfect Conditions, which is another short story collection. And I'm really excited about it. I think these are my best stories yet. So,
oh, that's great. It is great. I watched your videos, and I am picking up the books. As I was telling you earlier, there's a little funky bookstore when I go home to Buffalo, which I say home. I go back to Buffalo. My daughter lives there. I'm going next week. I'm going to pick up the books from my little bookstore there, and but I'm impressed because I did listen to your reading of the dog story. That
Welcome Lost Dogs. Yeah.
Well, oh, it broke my heart, but it was so poignant, and it was a feeling story. How do you develop your characters? How do you get into their heads, and how does it happen?
That's a really good question. I guess the first part is I've always been fascinated by people and by very different people, all different kinds of people. So from the time I was very small, very young, I was observing very closely and seeing how people behaved. And I think you have to have that innate curiosity and be paying attention, really be an observer in the world. And observing as much as you can without judging people. I mean, I know we're not perfect and we all slip into that, but to really see them and be more curious about them than judgmental, if at all possible. And because you want to feel compassion for them as well. And I think another thing is there are some writers who are more like method actors. And I had a professor who once told me that I was in that camp from how I described my process, where I sort of can, put myself in whatever character, whoever's head I'm in, whatever character that is, whether they're male or female. I tend to write from a sort of 50-50 gender split. Half of my stories are told from male points of view and half are from female points of view. And once I'm there, I really, even if it's an experience that I haven't had, that's new to me, maybe I draw upon something else that was, similar emotionally, and imagine as vividly I can what that character is seeing and perceiving through their senses, and what their mission is in that moment. What are they going after?
Wow, that's so cool. It is. It's just, from what I gather, and it's, you have such a vivid imagination, and you bring home the feeling. You bring home the feeling, and I really can't wait to actually read more than I have. And it's only because I was limited that I could not get to the bookstore fast enough.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for supporting independent bookstores. It's very important in this age of Amazon. I will attest that authors get almost nothing. It's such a pittance that once Amazon, first of all, marks things down so hugely, as you know, they undercut everyone, and
right.
we get the very least amount of money from them. So even Barnes and Noble is truly better than by, if you have to shop at a big store. Powell's is another one who's really good, or yes, your local bookseller. I worked for a bookstore and a small bookstore, and it really does make a difference. It makes all the difference.
Good.
Buying from them. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad I can do my little part, which is I do my little part of anything. Oh, look at me. I look
That's all you can do.
My lousy internet. I'm going to put you on. I'm going to put me little and put you on. So where I thought we'd go next is you had talked about a book that's coming up, and maybe talk about the juxtaposition of how your thinking was when you first started writing, from your first book to now, and what kinds of things have affected you, because obviously you're in the circles that I am. You're in the climate change circles. You're in this, where we're in this predicament. I'd like to hear that.
Right. Oh, that's a great question. So my first stories in my collection, Train Shots, so again, that came out in 2014. So I was writing those stories, say from, about 2006, 7, 8, around there. And, it takes a few years. You're writing them, you're revising them, you're sending them out to get published. And I've always been drawn to issues of economic disparity. From the time I was really young, I was very bothered by why do some people have billions of dollars and other people live in mud huts and, in abject poverty, and everything in between. And then, as in our own country, the middle class has been hollowed out, and we're seeing such an increase in that income disparity. It drove my writing more and more. So I think the stories in my first book really, well, all of my stories seek to explore that in some way. And so I will add that my stories don't really just follow middle-class persons, that I really do seek out to tell stories about lower income people, working class people, and wealthy people. So my first book has a story about a pop star who may or may not be based on Britney Spears, and which is about her breakdown, this celebrity's breakdown. But the title story, Train Shots, is about a train engineer who's going through a crisis because of all the deaths that have happened on his tracks. And that's a very tough job. Many people don't realize that trains are hitting, people and animals all the time. There are people who try to, beat the tracks and try to go through the train gates. And that book was more focused on exploring people in despair, but I think from across all sections of life, and encountering people from other classes. As you mentioned, the dog story, Welcome Lost Dogs, where this expat woman in Costa Rica is having to find out someone has kidnapped her dogs, and she goes on a journey to reclaim them. And then my next book, Juventud, went into that even more deeply. So Juventud begins in Colombia in South America in 1999, which was really the height of all of the paramilitary and guerrilla violence, and of course mixed in with the narco trafficking.
Wow.
But I really wanted that book to look at the activist movements down there that were going on at the time, and there were huge marches and demonstrations, and so that book went into how things are just not black and white. There are very varying shades of gray, and so the young woman in that book falls in love. Mercedes falls in love with this young activist, Manuel, and she begins to find out some shady dealings of her father in the past, and how he's involved in the higher ups of Colombia, and these kids get in sort of over their heads, and some tragedy occurs, and she flees. So that book was a bit more about neoliberal economic policy. Wow. Played out, how it affects people's lives. So that was my first introduction into that kind of research, really going down the rabbit hole, if you will, of finding out that neoliberal economic policy, which is, austerity, deregulation, all of those things, was really pushed on the developing world first, and tried out there. Of course, it was sold to us as trickle-down economics, which was a lie. It was explicitly designed to funnel money in the reverse, from the lower classes to the upper class. And when I read these documents, I mean, these were real economic policy documents. It absolutely made me sick to my stomach, because you realize that this was intended to do this. It was not, someone's slip of the, it was not by mistake. It was, and so, and I remember realizing that at the time as I read these very, these books and articles, primary source material, where I thought, oh my God, if this ever really, if people really knew this, or if people were more aware of this, how upset they would be. Well, then we did become more aware of it in the coming years with the recession and Occupy Wall Street, and you started seeing articles on neoliberalism. So many people were confused, thinking it had to do with a far left kind of liberalism, which I can understand. The name of it is confusing. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with political leftism or anything. It is completely, it's a name for economic policy. So and I still run into people who are confused about that.
Yeah, well, so do I still, but we've been schooled, for the, we have float around the progressive circles also online. I mean, we've been schooled.
Right. And it's understandably confusing, that name. So that was what that book was about. And so when I finished that, and I finished the book tour, it's like, oh, what's next? What is worth all the agony, the sacrifice, because it takes a long time to write a good book. what is worth my time? What are the big issues going on in the world today? What am I maybe not aware of? And I was curious about climate change because it was about, this was in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
right after 2015. And I'd been busy with my own thing. I thought, boy, but things seem to be getting worse. Just in the periphery. Oh, it seems to be getting worse. So I really dug into it. And, initially when you read articles, they end on, 20 or 2100 and 2050, things will be this bad. And I, like many people, I thought, oh, well, we have time, things can't, but then something told me to push deeper. And I did, and I'm very glad I did, because when I really got into the, as you said, the circles we move in, where the real discussions are going on privately, in private groups, forums, and whatnot, and sort of in this subculture exchange of information among scientists, activists, researchers, citizen journalists, you realize things are so much worse than we, we've been led to believe. So that is what spurred me to start a new novel that will be dealing with the fallout of climate migration and collapse.
This is amazing stuff. It is coming. I mean, we're seeing these things happening, and you are chronicling it for people, future generation, if there are any. How many? We don't know. I know. I don't like to sound like that. Then people's like, well, you're a climate alarmist. Well, I see what's going on. And so do you. You have a creative outlet, and you are using all of this to create things for people to understand in a different way.
Right. And part of this is because, art, what does art do for us? Why is it important? It's important because it offers the opportunity for a catharsis. So that's why when we read a really good book that resonates with us, where we really feel moved, I used to think it changed people. Well, it doesn't really change people in the way that you think it does. It doesn't change them in this prescriptive way. It offers us an emotional release. And that's very important. And when we experience art together, when we see a film or a play, it very much offers us, a similar experience as why we would come together for a community event, for a big potluck, for a wedding, for a funeral. It's something. It offers a catharsis, and that's why it's of so much value. And especially in troubled times. When do you hear the most poetry in your life? I would say I hear it most often at funerals. People often read, seek out poems and find a poem to read at a funeral.
Put them on the funeral cards. They always have a poem or song.
Why do we turn to poetry in those moments of strife? It's to help one another through that and to bear witness. So, I really have come to realize that about my work and why it's important to keep writing, even if it is for just today's audience right now. We have
today's audience, and I'm grateful that you are writing for today, so we can read it, and I can read it, and share you all over. It's terrific.
Because, thanks.
Well, you're a like thinker, and we've came to an almost. The blindfolds came off. Tell me, when was it for you? Did you have that like little epiphany or that moment where you said, oh my gosh, this is serious. This is happening.
Yeah, it was, we had a terrible hurricane last year in Florida where I live, but really it was watching what was going on, but then also all of the research I was uncovering, I started off too looking at peak oil as well and peak resources. And that was quite astounding, the projected depletions that we're going to be hitting regardless of anything else that happens around 2040, somewhere around, things are just, they're very, it's very dire. Looking at the sixth mass extinction of wildlife, which is going on, looking at the pollution levels, as we all have seen, the plastic pollution and the other pollution is just beyond imagining. So it was, for me, it was kind of cumulative. I had all these areas that I was researching, and when I put the whole picture together, and that's not even looking at the nuclear radioactive waste that is on the planet. And the more and more I uncovered, it was very clear. And when I really came to that conclusion, I was very depressed about it. I mean, I really went through a dark time and was in the throes of grief. But you do go through it. And I have learned how to manage it a bit better. And, for a while I couldn't write. I didn't know, again, if I had to rediscover what my motivation was to write, and something in me shifted. So I think I'm writing from a different place now.
That's what I thought. It had to happen because, well, as you grow in your ability and your writing and your art, it always does take you to different places. But this is, we live in some very, very difficult times.
Unprecedented. So, in so many ways, but I will add that my subconscious was working on this for longer than I thought. So even before that, I have this story in this book, Perfect Conditions. There's a story called Sustainable Practices, which I started writing about 2011, 2012. That's kind of a darkly comic story of these sort of hipster couple who go to an eco-friendly tourist village in Tahiti. And the woman has become obsessed with the place because she buys Tahiti water, which is of course a nod to Fiji water. Why are we importing water from this poor little island nation and flying it 6,000 miles on jets? And I was picking up. The story began because when I was in airports or wherever, I loved the Fiji water. I swore that I loved how it tasted, and my boyfriend at the time really gave me a hard time about that. He was like, "That is the worst thing you could be buying. That is so hypocritical." And he really, gave it to me, and I was like, "But I like the water." So
because you didn't think about it, like none of us do.
I was 25 years old or whatever, and I was like, But then I decided to, write a story where I sent this, this woman and her husband on their honeymoon, and they're, having this conflict about this, and they really discovered some dark things about the water. It became a story about, it's very much modeled on, what Nestle does. I've seen the documentaries on Nestle. I would go into some place and take the water and leave the villagers with, polluted water or whatnot, So, so there was that story. And there's several in this book that are about, that were cooking in my imagination.
Which you have, and I'm telling you, I can't wait. I cannot wait to go to get up there to the bookstore. There's one that people can read online right now. If one called The Perfect Pantry, and it was published. So it's in this book as well, Perfect Conditions. But The Perfect Pantry is you can find it online at Fantastic Floridas.
but it's about a woman who is recently divorced. She's, at loose ends. She was married to a man who had some money, but now she's had to reduce her budget, and she's working at part-time at a friend's store and struggling. And she is looking for pantry, thinking about rebuilding her, she's trying to put together the kitchen in her new house, and she looks up perfect pantries by celebrity chefs, and she inadvertently, by accident, ends up on prepper pantry sites. So she starts, and this was born out of my own prepping anxieties. That here, I went through a phase where I was really, stocking up the canned goods and all of that, and so she really gets into it, far more than I, of course, exaggerated it far beyond anything I would be capable of. But she's, taking self-defense classes, and, by the end of the story, she's, getting her guns, and, but it has a very unexpected ending, or at least most people have been surprised by the ending. So, again, that's another story born of our times and the anxiety that we are feeling. So I wrote that partly for myself, for my own catharsis, as a way to process my own lack of control in the situation, and my own obsessive, I go through some obsessive phases sometimes. And it turned into, I'm really pleased with how that story turned out. It's a bit darkly comic.
Well, if you don't have some of that comic irony in all this, I can't go without it. I mean, I do pieces.
No.
When I did my piece on Florida, you live in Florida, and
yes.
I called it Sinkholes and Assholes. So it was all about, and we went into the geological things, and I learned all about what Florida's made of, and then I talked about the villages and how the political persuasion at the villages is very Republican, and they made a swing for Trump to win Florida from the villages, the people that are getting all the sinkholes. And I said
they are getting a huge amount of sinkholes in that area.
11, 12, and it's because of all the overbuilding. Florida's not a rocky hok state. Tell us.
No,
I'm well versed. I want to ask you one more thing. Talk about how and what you do when you possess so much stuff and you got to get out. I heard you talking about it on a video, and I wanted you to replicate that. That was good.
When you have a lot of stuff, you're just going to have to leave it behind. I mean, you're not going to be able to, if you have to get out, you're going to be, so that's one thing that I think sometimes people don't think of if you're thinking about, really maybe going from prepping to homesteading, having animals, chickens, goats, doing that anywhere, is that we're entering just a completely uncertain time, where as these natural disasters escalate, that we are going to, you might have to leave all of that. If there's an enormous fire, if there's floods, if a sinkhole swallows your house, of course, but we just don't know. So the concept of, I would say to people, like, do what you feel like, do what you want. I mean, it's, but do realize that as well, that it may be for naught, or, you might.
Have you had to evacuate in Florida?
I have left for hurricanes. Yes, I have left. And it's a very emotionally wrought struggle when you leave in these occasions. I mean, this is what happens when people are on the outside looking at it, and stays away, and they just, you get all these messages from loved ones and people on social media, get out, get the hell out of there, like come up to our house, or come up to, we'll put you up. And what happens is, you have family members who you're responsible for back where you are who aren't as easily able to be moved. In Florida, we have an enormous, aging population, and those people can't be moved as easily. So if you have family members who are elderly, that's not so simple. If you have pets, that's not so simple. So and many people lack the funds. So you're talking about the more privileged segment of the society can leave more easily, and other people can't. So there's a total economic injustice there. So there's this inner grappling, and then there's a sort of survivor's guilt that even if everything's, fine, our house wasn't really damaged very much during the last hurricane last year. If you do happen to leave, well, then you are worried, and you have to grapple with some guilty, those feelings of having left people, and so you got yourself out, but so it's not black and white at all, and that is what the opening chapters of the novel I'm just getting off the ground explore that. So it ends up being a situation where you feel like there's no perfect decision, there's no right decision, there's a decision that you can make, and you try to just make the right decision for you, but you end up leaving, whether you decide to stay or leave. And then the person who decides to stay can also often feel like a fool, or they can often feel like, well, did I just do something really stupid? Should I have pushed harder to leave and just leave the house? It's very complicated. It's not as easy as people will find out as they're faced with.
Well, they are in our comment section right now. I don't know if you can see the comments, but Karen, can you see Karen's comment? She says, we're burning again. 2 fires around Redding, the California fires, 2 fires around Ukiah and Upper Lake, smoke-filled heated air here. I worry about my friends out there. Karen, my heart goes out to you. She's with us watching live. And Marcia's here, and she says, Kim, I'm pretty obsessed with staying updated on the Redding Inferno. So there's a lot of conversation that does get generated on our page too, but during these live streams, because of the conversation, what we're spurring. You're talking about Florida, they're talking about California.
Absolutely.
But it's fire and water. Wow.
Fire and water. Well, last spring, so we had the hurricane in the fall last year. In the spring, the entire state was on fire. Florida was burning, and the smoke was so bad, and people don't realize that either. Your eyes, your throat, your breathing, it is so incapacitating. And I don't even necessarily have, lung problems, or, I'm still relatively young or whatnot, but it is, now that's not totally unusual for Florida. Florida can burn, and we are supposed to naturally have those fires. There is a natural cycle to it, but things are getting more extreme, and our water events are becoming, the amount of water is, the deluges. We always had strong rain in the summertime, and now it is just, I can't even tell you how it's much more tropical and monsoon-like that it's becoming. And the storms are getting much more violent. Just the summer thunderstorms, the wind, the everything, it's all ramping up. And if you're perceptive,
last year.
Yeah.
We got a tornado in Western New York where I live.
Oh, right.
My house. It was traumatic.
That's right. I remember.
Everybody lived with me through that whole thing. But it was crazy. But all of us have been touched. So many of my followers, our followers, are touched by all this. Now we have Doug, who just came on, and he said UK has the largest wildfire in their history, and they're expecting food shortages. Well, we've been reading and looking at the scientists together. I know you watch everybody. I do, Vanessa. And and it's there's people are sounding the alarm, and there's organizations like the Climate Mobilization. Are you familiar with the Climate Mobilization?
I don't know that I am familiar with that.
Okay,
I don't know. Maybe I follow so many different pages.
Well, this is this is going through. This is not just a page. This is a whole thing to start getting into every city to mobilize a plan of action for each municipality, each city, to have a way to leave, to do whatever happens.
Yes. That's where we are. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be, I still need to go take CPR class. Anything we could do like that. We all should be as certainly that is what we can do. To be able to help each other, to be able to help our pets, to be able to help,
that's another issue you think about. My God, all those people. We have one follower who had the hurricane, who lived in Houston. She lives in Houston, and she's not with us tonight, but I felt terrible about her house flooded and they had to go through all of that evacuation and rebuilding, and several people did. And what about the pets? That was a conversation on one of the chats today in one of the pages, the pets, or one of the groups. And I didn't want to deal with that because I have 5 cats. What do you do? Put them all in the car, 5 cats? Put them in the car, and then what?
Right. What do people do who have horses? What do people do? All of these, it all gets more complicated. But at least we can do that, is, get with our friends and families and neighbors and come up with several different scenarios and plans. Okay, if you can't go there, well then, what about going here? Or, who in the neighborhood has what? Finding out what, getting to know your neighbors. I know we've tried to do that a little bit more, and you want to know if people in the neighborhood are in trouble too. You want to know what's going on. You want to know that now, like if there's people to watch out for, that, so when things do happen, you're better prepared to go through that. And these events really do, one thing they do is they bring neighbors and communities together in all sorts of ways. I mean, in cooperative ways and in tense ways.
Well, you want to hope that's the case, because remember in New Orleans, where those people were running around, and it was like the gated communities. They were trying to, you couldn't even walk near there, and they were patrolling like vigilantes, and it was a racial divide. It was horrible. Right.
And you have all those things come out, and we're going to see both. We are going to see both people helping each other, and we are going to see terrible brutality and nastiness. That is the history of humanity. That is the history of. So, but the thing I am definitely noticing that has alarmed me in the last, this summer, is in watching this very closely in the articles and news that I dig up, from phys.org, and you see the science papers published, and it's very interesting. They come out on those sites, Science Daily and such, and then there's a sort of wave as they get pushed out to the more mainstream, and it's very interesting how the different mainstream articles then translate that information, or bring it to the public. And if you really see, it's very interesting. But the damage to the crops is definitely something I don't recall seeing until more recently. I mean, there was a bit of that last summer, and it's really hitting now.
And Kim says, time to hit the farmers markets and can your own food. We do. I do that. So it's going to happen here. But we didn't get as much grown this year. We had problems. We're getting older. My husband had health issues, but we have a greenhouse and we have all those things ready, but ready for what? I just say, ready for the inevitable. I'm not a prepper.
And what if
I'm just a living person, but we all have to think of those things.
You bring up some really, really good points. I think my partner is older than me, so I'm 39, going to be 39 in a week.
I thought you were younger. And my daughter's age. Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I'm 39. My partner is 61, so he's older. But he's quite he's quite lively, and he's young at heart. So, but when I first was encountering all this information, and I went into that sort of panic mode, grief, anxiety, it's like, oh, well, we've got to get out of this. We've got to move rural and become permaculture like farmers and garden and just completely change our life. We've got to, and it's like, that talk about easier said than done.
I know it. I'm doing it. I'm trying. It's hard.
Right. And you're just, a garden, a greenhouse, like all of that is really hard work. And we ended up taking a trip to visit my relatives who have a free-range cattle organic farm out in Minnesota, and we stayed with them. And whenever you stay with them, it's a sort of working vacation, helping out on the farm, and it's wonderful out there. They're wonderful people, and you just realize no, you're certainly not gonna have older people really out there becoming organic farmers in a big way when they're it's backbreaking work. It's hard for people who are 40.
My husband is out there doing all this stuff every day. He's doing something outside, and he's we're both pushing that lovely 6 number, but we're going to do whatever we can do as long as we can.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And if you want to do that at this point, if you're interested in that, and that's something I would say to people, do what you want to do. But if you're not, don't beat yourself up to go and try to become some permaculturist. If that's not, maybe you should, there's different things you can do. There's different ways to approach this.
Intentional communities are something that people have been talking about, and there's those that are in those communities, other people in our circles, and there's a lot of solutions. But what I want to ask you politically, I know we're kind of segueing a little bit, but what do you think of the fighting? As far as keeping the fight up, not fighting against anything or not against anything. Fracking in my community is very important to me. We don't want fracking. I'm in an environmental watchdog group. I'm the treasurer. I do those things. I'm an activist still. I figure I'm going to do this no matter what the cards, what the tipping point is, if we've crossed it. I'm still going to do those things for the community. How do you feel about that local activism?
Local activism, I have friends who are very involved in that, and I think very, very involved. I can think of a few people who are. It's not where I did wonder about that. I wondered if that was the route I wanted to take or should take. And the fact is we have very limited, we each have 24 hours in our day. And I ultimately decided that wasn't the route that I wanted to take, but I completely respect my friends who are doing that. But I did decide, and I just wrote an essay about this that should be out shortly, feeling like after 2016, there was such a dark mood, a down mood for many people in this country. And I thought, well, what can I do that would have a direct impact now that has to do with, with what I care about, wildlife, and just how we've gotten here and the incredible decimation of wildlife, especially in Florida, where, as you said, things have been so overdeveloped. It's just tragic. Yet there are some beautiful places. I won't say untouched, because I don't think anything's untouched anymore. But to cut to the chase,
I think I agree with you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, even if you think it's untouched, it's not untouched. But I decided to go around and visit the various, wildlife refuges where they take in, big cats and we have many of them in Florida. And that we would, do something like that, which is close by, within an hour or two in the car, and our entry fees, our donations would directly go to that place and they are completely dependent on people visiting and making donations to be able to support those animals, which have been rescued from absolutely deplorable conditions, people who have private collections and, these roadside petting zoo kinds of things.
Oh
So
my God, they still do that.
It's so terrible. So that's a mixed experience, because you're seeing these magnificent creatures, but and then you're hearing these stories, but I did feel like it was something I could do, and that it was small or whatnot, but I felt more moved to do something like that than start getting involved locally, politically. But I think people can do. You have to sort of search your heart and your mind, and look at, maybe think outside the box a little bit. Again, I think I believe, are they called CERT classes? There's community emergency response training. I think, is that what it stands for?
That's an idea that I haven't even thought of.
Or Red Cross, like learning how to be getting trained as a volunteer for the Red Cross or something.
I'm the one that would need the help.
Right, I know. Right. And again, this isn't there's certain people this is for, and there's certain people it's not for. It's like, not everybody's meant to become a nurse. Like, don't become a nurse if you don't feel like you can become,
But I do like that idea. I've never talked about that before in working in your community, in taking those kinds of courses, and it doesn't have to just be the local fire, volunteer beer swinging firefighters or anything. It can be any of us deciding that, well, we want to have some kind of tool in our arsenal that can help others in the event of fire, floods, terrible weather, extreme, abrupt climate change type events.
Right. And the time to do it is now. The time to do it is in the downtime, because you can't do it when it's happening to you. You can't, when the storm is bearing down is not the time.
You'd like the climate mobilization. I think you'd like that organization. They're really trying to do something like that, to make people aware in the community. And I make people aware in the community. I don't know where you live. How do you have that? Do you ever have that conversation, these conversations?
I do. And I do have them with relatives, and my family is very mixed. We have people on the left and on the right. And I find that, I do my best to meet people where they are. So, if people are skeptical about some areas, it's like, well, then talk about, and the natural disasters are getting so insane this year that, I don't care what you believe, just there's something going on. So I think most people will. So whether it's, religious, Book of Revelations, if that's where someone is, or peak oil, again, peak resources, that's very, you can't really dispute any of that. I mean, to me, you can't dispute climate science either, but peak oil, all of these things are poised to create a lot of havoc. The plastic pollution, all of that. So
we all talk about this. All of us commentators online, we talk about these issues ad nauseum, but it is getting out there. We're getting out of the echo chamber.
Right. And so it's like, do your best. I do my best to meet people where they are and find as much common ground as you can. And you can always build bridges with certainly the common sense approach of like, look, we need to have community preparedness. And whether that's, outreach through churches or community centers or, just neighbor to neighbor. And because what's going to happen is these events are going to when they do happen, they throw everybody together from all stripes. And, maybe not quite the wealthy, because they have their private neighborhoods and their private firefighters and such. So maybe they can fancy themselves, cordoned off for a bit. But at some point, that won't last either. That will only go so far. And so it's going to be up to us to do what we can to help each other.
Has anybody ever called you part of the climate change cult?
I've been. I guess I haven't been really. called that directly, but I've sort of heard that lobbied about.
Because
it's a shame.
This is no cult. This is scientific reality and facts and what's happening to our atmosphere and what we're doing to the environment and all. And I just wondered, if you've come across that yet. But in your creative writing skills, I bet you could come up with some amazing stories about all of that whole genre. Oh, certainly.
Oh, certainly. And there are certainly, always go through things with caution. There are people looking to take advantage of other people in every subculture, in every, so, that's to be, unfortunately, sadly, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
because we're sitting here talking about all this, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're sitting here talking about all this stuff about what's happening, weather and all, and somebody could be watching us saying, what are they talking about? Are they crazy? They're climate cultists. They're and I get all these trolls, and they say these things. Oh, I don't trust James Hansen. I don't trust any of these scientists.
Well, I understand their mistrust because the IPCC has been, 1.5 degrees was a number agreed upon by politicians and economists, not scientists, but they, they dragged scientists and, basically forced them to, say these things, which, that would be a safe degree of warming or whatever, which is all baloney. And so I could understand that people's mistrust, but they don't realize that the mistrust is actually for sort of the wrong, I don't know. It's not that, the scientists who are working on this, pursuing their passions or their interests, in just studying their different fields, whether it's the cryosphere, the ice, or the oceans or whatever, they are arriving. I think people misunderstand consensus. First, the researchers come to their own independent. They do their own independent studies, and then when they have their dialogue amongst themselves, that's how the group reaches consensus. It's people coming up independently what they find first, and then it's, this is what we have each independently determined. Looks like we have a scientific consensus on this issue. The trends are clear, and I think for a lot of us who have arrived at, and I went into this, with a healthy dose of skepticism. I didn't know where we were in 2015. I was like, well, looks to me like from just what I see, things are starting to get worse just from my own observations. So, okay, I'm going to be, I know I'm coming from that place, but let me look at all of it. Let me look at what the peak oil people are saying. Let me look at and all of this with as unbiased as I could be and see what it's telling me.
Vanessa, I've been on the same journey as you.
Yeah.
Only I don't write creatively. I just spout off and commentate and publish articles.
But it's like, I don't want this to be true. No. I don't want.
No, nobody wants this to be true.
Nobody wants this to be true. I plenty of other things I would love to be spending my time on right now. But then the climate falling apart and entering a hothouse state rapidly.
Wow. So, this has really been a wonderful dialogue. I have absolutely enjoyed it. We're hitting the hour mark, actually. Can you believe it? Almost.
Yeah, that went fast. My goodness.
Are there things that you would like to impart on the audience or does anybody have any questions for Vanessa? I'm going to put up all the links to her books and her website and a couple of videos, so you'll have all that. And I would love to do this again with you.
Oh, absolutely.
I really would.
Yes,
this was
certainly
really nice.
Yes.
And like people can thinking.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. And of course, you can find me on Facebook. I have an author page, which you can follow. I have my website, which is just my name, vanessablakeslee.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, although I don't use those terribly much. I'm it's too hard to keep up with it all.
No, you can.
But I do.
You won't get off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on it a bit. I'm on it, but I'm on Facebook a lot. And I also have an Indiegogo campaign that I crowdfunded all of the to offset the book tour, book launch expenses for this book, and it was successful. It succeeded. It met its goal. And when that happens on Indiegogo, they put you in an in-demand category. So the campaign is still open. It can take contributions.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's open for 6 months, and it has greatly helped to offset my travel expenses to go to readings and book signings, and
absolutely.
So that is. In these times of austerity, publishers do not give you money for book tours unless you're, maybe J.K. Rowling,
right?
So they expect you to go to speaking engagements, but it's on your own dime.
Right.
It's this conundrum. So, but thank goodness we have the tools right now with the internet, with those crowdfunding tools to, and it's worked. It's worked great. So, but the book you can get. Again, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, you can order the publisher's name. Here it is. There's the book again. The publisher's name is Curbside Splendor, which is a terrific publisher out of Chicago.
And where are you right now? I wanted you to end and tell us that you were right now.
Yes, I'm in North Central Pennsylvania at a wonderful writing residency called Soaring Gardens, which is part of the Ora Lehrman Trust. Ora Lehrman was a very notable visual artist painter in the mid 20th, late 20th century. And when she passed away, she had it in her trust, her will, to start an artist residency like Yaddo, like McDowell and the famous ones, where you get a little scholarship to come here, and I have this lovely little church building here for 4 or 5 weeks where I've been writing, and it's wonderful. It's great next to a farm.
I'm so proud of you. I don't even know you yet in the flesh, but I am so proud of you and so happy to have had you on here.
Thank you. I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Oh, I hope so too. And I have a feeling I might try because my folks are in Florida.
Oh, great.
So I would love to. Anybody, I will say, Marcia said, thank you, Vanessa and Sandy. Really good conversation. I hope it's one of a few that we might have coming in the future. And I will give you the last word. And then I'll say goodnight. And you wait, we'll go off and into the sunset.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say thank you for listening. And, to those who are listening, who are enduring these natural disasters and seeing, we're all watching these extreme events just amplify exponentially across the globe, and seeing news of food shortages, that you're not alone. We're not alone. The more I think we can feel that we have each other is just so. It's been so key for me getting through this. And there are places, where you can seek out support, look for support in your communities, and build those relationships now. I feel like it's vital that we build these relationships now.
Good. And that's kind of a similar message to me, but you have it so succinctly and so lovely. So thank you very much, and everybody, good night. And
thanks for listening.
I have Nick, the meteorologist, Nick Humphrey, on the 30th. So don't forget, everybody, come back with the 30th. I will resume That Was the Week That Was show next Friday night.
Oh yeah, he's on next. When is it? The 30th?
Yes.
Is that?
Yep. So save up your questions for Nick, because he is smart. He knows a lot. Yes. All right, guys. Peace. Thank you very, very much for coming, everyone. Good night.
Right.